Welcome to Act 3, the podcast where we explore how to thoughtfully shape the rest of our lives. I'm your host, Cara Gray. This podcast is sponsored by Good Morning Freedom, my retirement coaching service where I help executives and professionals plan their Act 3. For more information, stay tuned until the end. Today, I welcome Dani Klein Modisett to the Act 3 podcast. Dani is a comedian, writer, actor, and most recently, the CEO and founder of Laughter on Call. She is the author of 2 books on the importance of laughter in family life, Take My Spouse, Please, and Afterbirth, Stories You Won't Read in a Parenting Magazine. She taught stand-up at UCLA for a decade. In 2018, her mother was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and she created Laughter on Call, bringing comedians to people facing the disease to mitigate feelings of isolation with laughter. She teaches workshops for healthcare workers and families, sharing simple comedians' tools to help create connection and bring comic relief. In COVID, LOC's services moved to virtual, running interactive laughter programs, taking on the urgent need for mental wellness. To date, LOC has run over 550 events for companies globally. LOC has been featured in the New York Times, Washington Post, London Times, and AARP. LOC is currently a case study for Harvard Business School, where she has been a speaker. She has run workshops at Stanford, MIT, Columbia, UCLA, Duke, Dartmouth, the Oregon Gerontology Conference, and CALA. Dani has been a speaker at the Milken Institute, WBENC National Conference, Hilton, and many more. As an actor, she worked on Broadway and many NBC shows, including Law and Order. Dani, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. That's you really grabbed my whole life. This is your life.
This is your life.
Yeah.
Yeah. Your career has really spanned a lot of different things: comedy, writing, acting, and now as the founder of Laughter on Call. We mentioned in your bio that your mom's diagnosis of Alzheimer's was the catalyst for starting Laughter on Call. Tell me more about that and kind of the process for how you evolved and created it.
Oh, sure. So, I was actually on the road with the second book, Take My Spouse, Please. And I was doing like a 15-city tour and I was all over the country. And then midway, I got a call from a friend of my mother's who said, your mother is arguing with waiters and she can't fill out a deposit slip. And I was like, well, arguing with waiters, that's kind of a piece of work. But not being able to fill a deposit slip, that was, she worked in real estate, like money was her thing.
Yeah.
So I was concerned. So, I went to New York. I flew to New York and, I'm based in Los Angeles, but as I said, I was touring and my sister flew in from Boston and we came and we did find that she was really like bills everywhere and you know, plates and she'd taken in a rescue dog, which probably wasn't the right timing.
Mm.
And so I hired a lot of people. I'm just telling you all this because maybe I think your listeners will probably appreciate like the Alzheimer's journey. So I don't always
Yes.
use much detail, but I think it's kind of relevant since it's hitting like 6.9 million people. um,
Yeah, really prevalent.
uh, so I hired a bunch of people to help, and then within 2 weeks, she fired everybody, and so this thus became the dance of
Yeah.
and we did eventually get a team in place and then, I realized, oh, she should be in LA, like, where I live. My family, I had my kids were young then, and so brought her out here, found a really cool place that was, like, had a chandelier in the lobby, and I was like, "Oh, she's gonna think she's on the Upper East Side, right? Not the Upper West Side."
Yes.
And, and, she liked it, but then she quickly realized she wasn't leaving, and then she became depressed and withdrawn, and I felt really guilty about it, like,
Yep.
"Oh god, what have I done?" And, I was actually at my dentist, and because it's LA, she's, like, also, like, a life coach, and I was saying, "Oh, I just feel so bad, like, I just wish I could hire a comedian to cheer my mother up." And she was like, "Oh, why don't you do that? That's a good idea." And I was like, "Really? Can you do that?" Like, and she said, "Yeah, go put feelers out." So I put up on Facebook looking for a comedian interested in gerontology paid gig. And my phone rang like 5 minutes later. It was my friend in New York, and she said, "Oh, I know someone. I know a comedian who wants to work with seniors. She's like sitting on park benches. You should call her." And so I did, and I had the woman come over, and she had really great instincts, and she did, now, as you mentioned, like I do all this training, and there were some great comic instincts that I could already see were transferable, which were, she took her in fully, made eye contact with her, and she was completely candid, and she was authentic, and she
Yeah.
was I know. You don't wanna talk to me? No. You're probably thinking, "Who is this schmuck just talking to me?" And my mother heard the word schmuck, and like you, like most people, she started laughing. And then she repeated it. She was like, like she had like, like meeting an old friend or something, you know what I mean? Like she was lit again. And I thought, and then the comedian was like, they had like a schmuck off because that's, comedians gotta escalate. And and so I thought, oh, like I was like, oh, well, that's what I want. Like I want that. So come, and I hired her 8 hours a week, and she came mostly around meal times and spent time with her and made her laugh. And it really changed my mother's quality of life. Like she started engaging with her community and just feeling more open and even joyful. And so I wrote an article about the experience for AARP magazine. And then I got hundreds of requests for comedians. All I was like shocked.
Wow.
And then I thought, well, yeah, you know what? Like comedians always need work. And this population, this ever growing population could really benefit from this as I've witnessed. And so that's how I launched Laughter on Call. That's how it all started.
Wow, that is, um, a beautiful and touching story and, like, such a ecosystem that you created that, like, employed people and,
Right.
like,
Right.
helped with the problem, so that's really cool. To carry on with that conversation, tell me about, like, in addition to your mom, the most memorable moments or success stories from Laughter on Call so far to
Um,
date.
wow, there's so many because during COVID, of course, we could no longer go in person. Like we had people working one on one around the country. And then very quickly after that, executive directors of communities were seeing what was going on. And so they asked me for training. Like, could you teach my people how to engage in this way? And as mentioned, I taught stand up and I've written books about like taking comedy like out of the clubs and into your life, comedians tools to improve your life. So I basically rated all that and I came up with a training. It's like 8 tools. It's called Pilates. I say it's like Pilates for strengthening your caregiver core. It's 8 tools.
Oh, that's so
Yeah,
good.
8 tools for self-care and creating connection through all stages of cognitive decline. So that I mean, when I think about like a real highlight of that, I've done that all over the country. And one highlight was so Jewish Senior Life has one of the top 100 largest communities in Rochester, New York,
Yeah,
uh, of seniors. I don't know how many thousands of people live there. It's like a whole thing.
yeah.
And we did a training there where we did the entire staff. That's like what I love to do is get the people from the kitchen to the laundry to the caregivers to the executive director, like get everybody together because that's how you really change a culture is you introduce levity into a circumstance where you would never think that there could be levity. And yet it's so important, especially because retention is such a big issue in that field that
Sure.
if you create a place where there's space for laughter, and it's interesting because in the beginning, there were definitely people that were like laughter and Alzheimer's, like what? Like that's inappropriate or some reaction like that. And the thing is, like, I know it's sad. I lived it.
Yeah,
Mother ended up dying of this, and it's super sad. But it's not sad every single moment. And so what we're trying to allow for are the moments that are not sad, whether you actually like laugh together, like the absurdity of it. And a lot of people, the people who don't say laughter and Alzheimer's, but the other people who say, thank goodness for laughter, because we could not get through without it. So those are my people. um,
Yeah.
so that event was really big. And then also memorable was during COVID, we started doing virtual one-on-ones. And I didn't think that was going to work because it's so,
Yeah.
but
Especially
it
for
got
older folks that aren't necessarily used to this kind of technology.
exactly, but it actually
Yeah.
did work. And we had
Yeah.
relationships that were meaningful and made a difference. And even one person who died of COVID, but he had his person and they met every week. And his wife said, like, it made a difference in his life. So that was super memorable. And then we've had corporate, we ended up growing. So during COVID, because we couldn't get to our seniors, I created something called lunchtime laughter. I was told we were going to have to close. Like, what do like, you can't get to your people. So as a last gasp, I was like, okay, well, let's just live stream. We had a camera in the office because we were training comedians. So I was like, let's just live stream. We'll get like Monday through Friday, 12 to 12:30. We'll call it lunchtime laughter and anybody can show up open to the public. We'll just publish the Zoom link. And of course we learned our lessons with the publisher, the Zoom poppers. I thought were so like,
Zoom
oh, look at,
overload.
well, no, it was more like, oh, look at these young boys who want to join in. And then it like was bad.
Oh
And it
dear.
was so disturbing. But it was it became like cool, like popular. And the interesting thing was it was not just seniors. Like that's the thing. It started to be just people who felt isolated and lonely, including my whole team, myself and my whole team. I used to do so I was raised on the East Coast and there used to be this guy, Cy Sperling, the hair club for men.
Yeah, yeah, I remember him.
And he would get on and say, I'm not just the owner, I'm a customer.
That's right.
And I totally felt that way during COVID. Like I was doing it as much for myself to have the benefits of laughter and connection as I was for everyone else. In any event, that I started reading about, HR and the problem that HR was having with mental health
Yeah,
and keeping teams connected and everybody working from home and how do you create a sense of belonging or product everything was falling off the rails.
that's right.
So I came up with programming for them because people were trying to do happy hours, but it was
Yeah.
like, three loud people and six other people, 600 possibly other people with their cameras off. And anyway, so we started November of 2020 doing lots of virtual for corporate. And
Wow.
that was very successful. And so then now, as we've transitioned out of COVID the last year or two, now we do both. So now we'll do virtual team building and communication tools, and we're much more in the learning and development space there. And we go in person. So we just did a really big event for Comcast. We did one for Hilton recently. That was really successful. Just bringing people together to be authentic and introduced the concepts of levity, of listening and empathy and vitality and accepting imperfection, paying attention to timing and yes and. So that I just ran you through like that's one of our acronyms is levity. And we focus on those tools and we it's all interactive. So and those are really rewarding. I would say inevitably there's people at the top who are like because as I said, it's interactive. So we ask people to really kind of leave their judgment at the door kind of thing. And we were doing this gig for Amazon. It was one of our first in-person gigs. And you go around the room and you do a name, you say who you are, how long you've been there, and some kind of gesture and sound for something that brings you joy. And and I go, I'm Dani, I'm a dancer. And then but we get to this one woman and she's like, I'm Carol, and if I have to do this, I'm gonna throw up. And it was again, like, it was so wonderfully authentic. Of course, she got a huge laugh because
Right.
it was so truthful.
Yeah.
A and then by the end, like, she was totally into it and running games and really involved. And it's often those people that are most reticent, if you give them permission and say, nobody's going to judge you, we're here to have like fun and leave your status and your title. Nobody cares. We're just human beings connecting. And then, of course, that's how you strengthen the culture overall. So that was a very long answer.
No, I love it.
Because of that.
And I feel like there isn't a day that passes now that I don't read about this epidemic of loneliness that we
Sure.
have in this country.
Oh.
Yeah, I think we need to help you figure out how to scale this.
I love that idea.
Quickly, we need to get you in touch with the U.S. Surgeon General. It's like a big,
Definitely.
yeah. So, I mean, it's just really become, I don't know if it was a result of the pandemic or if it just came to the forefront as 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 the epidemic or pandemic happened.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not really sure about that, but this is most interesting work. And I love hearing the story of the evolution. Um, I usually start at the beginning, so we're going to backtrack just a little bit and talk about teaching stand up at UCLA
Oh my
and
goodness.
what that experience was like. Because this podcast is, I usually start at the beginning. I'm not so sure why I jumped into your current work, but regardless, we're going backwards. So, UCLA, and how did that teaching influence what you're doing now?
Oh, okay. So you want to go way back. I was a waitress. That's really, well, that's way back. That's
Typical for an actor, right?
right. Like I was a waitress, and people would say, "Why are you a waitress? Like you're so funny. You don't need the food to distract. Like go do stand up."
Yeah.
And so, I had a boyfriend at the time. I was living in LA, and he offered me a class at UCLA to take a class at UCLA as like a holiday gift.
Oh,
And
cool. Cool
so,
boyfriend.
yeah, he was. He didn't turn out to be
Ish.
so cool, but he started cool. That was a cool gesture.
Yes.
Little did he know that I was going to use it to take a class in stand-up comedy. And he was probably hoping for home ec or something. Um,
Yes.
so I took the class, and because it's LA, of course, the teacher was Shelley Bonus, who was Richard Pryor's ex-wife. Like, of course, because you're
Like
in
it
law.
is. Yeah.
And she was wonderful and eccentric and just really believed in using the craft creatively, not just set up and punch. And anyway, after the first class, she's like, well, you're a comedian. You may never do this. It's a terrible life, but like, you're a comedian. That's how you show up in the world. And I didn't fully, and then I did end up, so then that was long. So I took the class, I graduated, I started doing sets right away. I was touring, and I didn't completely understand what she meant. And then 10 years later, I went back and taught the class. So,
Full
and then I
circle.
knew what she was talking about. Like there's people whose their lens is just outsider and unique, and they have a certain energy, and like, yeah, you see it. They may never do it. I've
Yeah.
had students who had that. So
Yeah.
that's how that started. So then I ended up teaching there and I loved it. And I was still young enough. Like I used to love to do this trick at the opening of class where I would sit with the students and then wait for the teacher not to show up and then see what happens in the room, like who responds. And then like just that kind of, there's that word that people do. Mob. What's that
Flash
thing?
mob?
Yes, like, "Oh, thank you." Yes. Right. It's not Alzheimer's, I don't think, I hope.
Oh,
Uh, but that idea of, really making it in the moment and creating an experience in the moment, and so I would pretend that, like, "Where's the teacher?" And then, of course, it would be revealed that it was me. Not that funny, but it just kind of said, "This is not gonna be like any class you've ever been to. Like, we're gonna blow it open here, and it's theater and comedy, and anything goes as long as it feels authentic." So I was doing that, and then I actually and then I wrote a show about marrying my husband. I had met my husband, and I still had an apartment in New York, and I had to give up the apartment. My father had died, so I went through that, the cancer thing,
mm,
and I still had the apartment, And I was having a really hard time getting out of the apartment because that's where I was living when my father died. And it was like I knew, and like there were these sweaters there that I couldn't throw out from the 70s that were his. And I was there and I was like, oh, I know this is a play. And you mentioned that I did Law and Order.
Yeah.
So one of the times that I went to New York to leave New York and give it the apartment, I got like a really good job on Law and Order, like a lead of an episode. And so that was like, okay, well, I'm not giving up the apartment. I can't give up the apartment. Look at me. And
Yeah. Law and Order.
right. I'm saying, when you're a New York actor, like that's the thing. You got to be on Law and Order.
That's the thing.
So I couldn't give up and so I couldn't get out the door to come to LA to get married. Like, and I thought, well, this is a play. Like
It's a
it's a
play.
major. Like I know what a play looks like, and this is the play. You can't get out. Move on with your life, threshold, blah blah. Reluctant hero, the whole thing. And then I got a call from an executive at NBC who had seen my stand-up tape. And he said, yeah, hi, I saw you stand up and I want you to come to New York and do your solo show. And I was like, my what? And he said, yeah, you're a comedian, like your solo show, like your 45-minute show. And I'm like, I don't have a show. And he goes, "Oh, I'm not asking for Seussical. I just want you to come to New York and do 45 minutes." And I realized he totally made me laugh, first of all. And then I realized in that moment, like that's the call. Like if you're a professional actor, comedian, and someone calls you and gives you that opportunity and you say no to that opportunity, then you need to go to law school. Like that, then this is that.
Yes.
Like if you get the call and you say no. So I said yes. And so so I wrote that. I rehearsed it. I looked at a calendar. He wanted it 6 weeks. So I wrote for 3 weeks, rehearsed for 3 weeks, put it up in LA for 2 nights, and then came to New York and did it. And so I say all that because then I was out pitching that as a television show, like a runaway bride thing. Because the whole
Mhm.
piece is about how I can't get married and I don't want to get married. I'm so afraid. And then I got pregnant. So that's a relevant piece of the history because everything changed. When I got pregnant, my reps were like, "Okay, well, why don't you go have your baby?" I mean, this was 20 years ago, so they were like, "Go have
Mhm.
your baby and then call us," like, basically a pregnant.
That probably still happens today.
Well, you're uninsurable is part of the problem. So if you're not already a series regular, like if you're not already in the mix, it
Yeah.
is a risk to take some. I'm not agreeing with it. I'm just saying. And so then I started writing more because I couldn't perform. And then once I had the baby, I was like, oh my gosh, if the choice is be in a comedy club or be with my baby, like,
Yeah.
I guess I'm just a traditionalist because I want to be with my baby. So that's how the first book happened. The afterbirth stories you won't read in a parenting magazine was because, first of all, I was completely shocked being a mother. Like I don't know how I never got the memo. I didn't know. My friends were comedians. Like nobody had babies. Like I remember going to my friend's house who was a more traditional woman who already had like 3 kids. And she had like a yellow legal pad and she was like, you need the following things, Danny. Like,
Like what?
right. Like nursing blanket. I was like, what? Um, and so that's how that show started. Cause I was like, I need to hear funny stories about how to do this because I really was lonely and with like a baby at home. Like I just didn't even, I mean, it was life changing. I love my son,
Yeah.
but I still was like where's the handbook?
Yeah.
Uh, so then I created that show. That was a show first, that book. And
Okay.
that was all funny people telling first person stories about basically the moment you knew your life changed forever becoming a parent. And that could look like whatever you wanted it to. And so I directed, edited the stories, directed them, we launched, and then we toured the country. So, with that show. And so that was the start of more long form writing for me that got me out of the clubs,
Mhm.
which I still love stand up, but, I find that what I want to I mean, after my mother was diagnosed, I spent like a year and a half doing Alzheimer's comedy. Like, what? Like, they're coming to clubs to escape that. And then I would say like, oh, you should all take notes. Like, I was always trying to save it. But,
Oh
anyway, so
gosh.
that's kind of now I've lost the thread of what
That's
you
okay. That's
said.
okay. It doesn't matter because this is just good. This is fun stories. This is exactly what I wanted out of this conversation. Um, Speaking of which, so your career, has had a lot of twists and turns, as we just discussed. I'm curious if you have any kind of philosophy in terms of knowing that the next thing is coming and it's going to be okay, or how has that worked in your life? Because I think this idea of like transitions and transitioning to another project, transitioning to another um, you know business is something that my clients are working through. And so I'm just curious if what your mindset is on that.
Okay, well, I'm really interested in the knowing it's all going to be okay aspiration. Uh,
So
that's
you
that.
don't know it's going to be
that-
okay.
I don't think you
Yeah.
ever know. I mean, I don't think you ever know. I was
Yeah.
very
I mean, just like no. I mean, no, like have a
well. It's all
feeling.
going to be okay. So you're probably
Yeah.
not going to launch a business that's going to literally kill you, like unless you're doing like a fun knife situation and you're having people come and test the product on you. Like you're probably not going to die.
No,
Beyond that, it's
but like earning
it
a living kind of stuff,
yeah, it's
like,
just full on courage. It's all
yes.
about courage.
Yep.
It's a lot about courage. Like caregiver courage, comedian courage,
Yeah.
life courage, entrepreneur courage. Like if there's anything that's consistent for all the work that I've done, whether as a comedian, as a wife, as a mother, as an entrepreneur, it's about courage. You
Yeah.
have to figure out your resource for courage, whatever that is, higher power, I don't know, banana, whatever gives you courage to keep
Right.
going.
Right.
Because there is no, in my opinion, like there just is no, it's all going to be okay. I know that's what people say. That's delightful.
Right.
And as I say, like chances are you're not going to die doing this, doing
Correct.
whatever it is you're doing. But maybe it's about redefining what okay means. Like what does okay mean for you? You know? And can you make peace with okay being gave it my all, but doesn't
Yeah.
seem to
Didn't
be
work out. So,
right.
yeah.
And just to be perfectly honest, like I could completely say that about my acting career, which was my everything.
Mhm.
Everything I did not, that's why I was so, um, floored by being pregnant and having a baby because it was never in my, I used to say like, I'm not dying to have a kid, but I am concerned that if I die without having one, I might regret that. And so that was my whole like, birth control plan. Like, I guess we should try. Once I got married, I was like, I guess we should try. Uh, and that was actually the first afterbirth story was because I was working as a paralegal at that point. And I had said to my husband, well, what I just said to you, I don't know, but we should try and we'll
Yeah.
kind of leave it up to the universe.
That's right.
And,
The universe.
and this is back before computerized word processing. So I was summarizing depositions. This is such a funny,
Wow.
no one asked me this stuff, and the person who introduced me to that was Patricia Heaton, who is from Everybody Loves Raymond. So she was a good
Right.
friend of mine and she was doing it. And she was like, so you can do this at home and make your own hours. And so it
Flexible.
was a really good job. And I was driving, you had to drive the floppy disk
Oh
to,
gosh. Yep.
to the main office. And I got dizzy. I was driving and I couldn't like read signs, probably like something was going on with my brain. And okay, well, P.S. the end of the story is I ended up in the ER. And the guy came out, the head of the ER, and he was like the head doctor, and he was like, well, I mean, we know you're pregnant. So there's that.
We're like, what?
Right. I was like, I truly
And so
and
began the strangeness of pregnancy.
exactly. And so that became like the first story of afterbirth was that crazy ride and the ambulance with the oxygen and, and then finding out that I'm pregnant. So, gosh, this is so funny, but now I'm forgetting what your original question was about this. Why I
Okay, I
want
was just like what your mindset was in terms of like all the shifting that's happened
Oh,
in
all the
your
shifting.
career.
So
Yeah.
so for sure. I mean, I think in terms of shifting and I'm in it right now. Like I'm,
Okay.
like figuring out right now what are we
Well, that's my next question. So,
do? Like how do you make these things profitable? Like you have
yep.
an idea. And I was very blessed with Laughter on Call. I mean, I think this is interesting for entrepreneurs. I was in a dance class with a woman, and after I wrote that AARP article, she'd
Hmm.
read it, and her mother had Alzheimer's. And she had a foundation. And she was like,
That's the
"You know what?"
universe.
Right. Oh,
Yeah.
well, there's so much universe in this whole thing because we should have been done and gone many, many times. And every time I'm like, okay, guys, I just don't, because I have a team I've had for 6 years, all the same people. I very, very close. But I'm like, I don't know. And then we'll get some job. Like last year or 3 months ago, I was asked to be the keynote speaker for WeBank, which is the Women's Business
Oh, yeah.
Enterprise. Okay, so
I know that.
that for funny, I auditioned or we had 2-minute pitch competition for FedEx and UPS. You had 2 minutes to pitch. So I write the pitch, but of course have to be funny. So I make jokes at the top and then I don't get to finish because they're strict. So they're like, and that's done.
And time.
Right. So then I was yeah, I felt terrible because I'm like, oh my goodness, like I've taught presentation. I should have nailed it. And then I called them and it was like a whole thing because I'd registered for the finals already because I was ridiculously cocky. And I said, well, I'm obviously not going to the finals. And she's like, no, you're not. And then she said, but the president wants to talk to you. The president of the association wants to talk to you. And I was like, oh, okay. And then this woman gets on the phone and she's like, yeah, don't worry about that. I want you to be the keynote for the national convention because your message is so important and you're so whatever. She wanted a flash mob. She's like, I wanted a flash mob. And then I saw you and I'm like, no, I want you and what your team does. So like that was a huge event for us. And then we just booked a gig for Paramount that we're going to do at the end of July. So like things just keep coming in just when you think, oh, just when you surrender,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then things shift. But I mean, in terms of like your what you're pursuing and you're pivoting, I think paying attention to what you care about. Like I had someone say that recently. I was at an event for Chase and they defined your values. What are your know your values as a company? What are your values as a company? And the way they define values is what would you care about if you weren't getting paid for it?
Right.
Oh, that's common. I was like,
Y-
so like,
I mean, a lot of people haven't heard it, but I happen to be in a space where I'm also, working in that space where I would do this even if I wasn't getting paid for it. So yeah,
right.
it's
So what
it's
do you care?
something, and it's even this concept called the second mountain. I don't know if you've read that David Brooks book where you gravitate as you get older to more purpose driven work. So
Oh, that's
here we are.
interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's the thing. Like, I had no intention. You've all just heard my whole life more than like any other podcast. Um, and I had no intention of working in the senior space, dealing with Alzheimer's. I mean, mental health for sure. I've always believed in the healing power of laughter and I have made it my life's work, but not specifically healing. I always liked, and this goes back to theater as well, of like creating community in a dark space where where all emotion is allowed and celebrated and it just so happens that if you make people laugh first, they'll go with you on the rest of the emotional journey.
Yeah.
And that's something that I have always put in all my work in the show that I wrote that producer asked me to write. It's called The Move. And it was all about getting out of that apartment. But the opening was funny. Like you
Hmm.
have to be funny at the top because That's how you get people to pay attention and you get
Right.
them engaged. And then you can go on the, I had my father died of cancer beat because you've earned it. You're not opening, and
That's not
also,
a opening line.
yeah. And also you got to get out of that quickly because then you're just like a cliche one woman
Yeah.
show person.
Yeah.
Um, but, uh, but same is true in the structure of what we do in the corporate space now of like, let's get everybody laughing and connecting with each other and feeling psychologically safe first. And then we can talk about the bigger, deeper conflicts and how to resolve them.
Yeah. So what's ideal for you next for Laughter on Call? Like what would be like, best case scenario in terms of growing that business? And
Right.
where can people find you to make that happen?
Oh, please. Yes. So we're at Laughter on Call on all social media, everywhere at Laughter on Call.
Yep.
And website is laughteroncall.com. And if you want to reach
Easy peasy.
me,
Yeah.
right, Dani, Dani at laughteroncall.com. I'm very available. So it's interesting because we run on two tracks, as I think I've probably made clear at this point, right? Like, so you run on the senior track,
Yep.
caregiving, helping families, helping connect in cognitive decline due to whatever, there's lots of dementias. There's not just Alzheimer's.
Mhm.
And then we have the corporate track, which is really addressing cohesiveness, a sense of belonging. I feel like we're the next iteration of DEI because DEI is now, maybe had its journey. And so
Yeah.
we're
I
in this.
actually worked as a DEI consultant 3 years before I
Oh,
started this. So yeah. Yeah.
right. And so there's some question about how much that really helped. And
Yep.
because what we experience, at least in the school system, I have kids in the public school, one kid in the public school, and it's like it actually can silo rather
Mhm.
than build.
Yeah.
Uh,
If it's
and
done
so
wrong. Yeah, absolutely.
we're very much about inclusion. Like that's what
Mhm.
our takeaway is
Yep.
inclusion. And so really interested in doing that, really interested in inspiring entrepreneurs. So for me personally, I love being a speaker. I love using I have a particular set of skills, which isn't that Liam Neeson from I have a particular set of skills, that serve, the message, you know what I
Mhm.
mean? 30 years as a performer, like, they're always surprised in the entrepreneur space when I speak as an entrepreneur because it's at a whole other level. I've been a performer since I'm, like, 9 years old,
Yeah.
and and, uh and so I love if you talk about your zone of genius. Do you ever talk about the zone?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
so
A little,
so
Gay Hendricks,
yeah, so
zone
that's
of
my zone
genius.
of
Yeah.
genius is you tell me what needs to happen for your people. I write it because I always write like for Hilton,
New. Yeah.
Paramount. I will write the I write a
It's
script.
all, like, custom for
Yes,
the
yeah, 100%
particular
custom.
culture and company that you're working with.
Exactly. So what do
Yeah,
you
that's
need
awesome.
these people to feel and experience and lead
Yep.
with? And then I write it, and I
Mhm.
usually come in, talk about my backstory because it's compelling, because it
Mhm.
has humanity in it.
That's right.
And then I'll bring in some of my team and we'll do something interactive. So make sure that it's not a PowerPoint where people are zoning out or on their phones.
Yep.
So that's kind of my zone of genius is the unique gifts that I have and my experience.
Yep.
So I love all of that. Uh, and so it's interesting about it's like having a stove with two burners that are both turned on high
Yeah.
because I'm also really passionate about, bringing laughter where you least expect it facing Alzheimer's. And that's a population that is growing exponentially.
Yeah.
So I think doing more of the caregiver training and family workshops, that's something that really I love to do and I think has value, purpose, as you said.
Yes.
And then the corporate work also has possibility for real needed impact. So I
Yeah.
think for Laughter
Both.
on Call, those are the two buckets, if you will.
Yeah.
And I want to keep everybody employed. I want to really
Yeah.
I'm very invested in my people and would like to grow that. We have comedians all over the country, but they work freelance. not but, and they work freelance.
Mhm.
And I'd like to be able to grow, have enough business so I can turn it, turn it over to my people who know it inside and out. And then I can be doing more of the speaking and training, and then the business itself can be run by my team. That's kind of my dream.
I like the vision. Dani, this has been such a fun conversation and also really inspiring. Thank you so much for your time and for being a guest here.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
This podcast is sponsored by Good Morning Freedom, my retirement coaching firm. I help executives and professionals plan the non-financial part of their retirement, like how to discover new purpose and how you want to spend your time. I offer a one-on-one coaching retirement blueprint package where we work together to discover some new avenues of exploration for your Act 3. This coaching is completely custom and will provide you with a ton of resources and support as you transition to this new stage of life. For all the details, please go to goodmorningfreedom.com/services.